Hello, hi. This is Rick de Jager. I wanted to do this video today because I want to try and talk about behavior. I think it's important because the behavioral aspects of Cri du Chat can be quite significant and can actually, long term be the main source of attention, main source of focus when you are trying to develop a routine, an agenda with your child, a development plan, etc. I wanted to talk about it today because I personally have had a lot of challenges with my son who has Cri du Chat and his behavioral patterns. And I've spoken to quite a few other parents. I've seen quite a few other things. I'm just seeing a lot of similarities, and I'm seeing people take different approaches to dealing with some of those things. And I just felt it good to raise the topic. And if other people want to produce videos with the same hashtag, we can create this community of sharing as much information as possible. So again, please do make your own content, share, contribute, reach out to me if you want to talk, and I'm also very keen to get your thoughts on things. So I want to talk today about a few topics. Why does Cri du Chat have an effect on the behavior of a child? How can CDC make a child different from a regular child? What are then the differences between behavioral development and the intellectual development? Because some of those things overlap. Some of the issues that you may see are not really a behavioral issue, that may actually be an intellectual development issue. I think we need to talk about autism. Self-harm is a very big topic for me, at least. Sensory profile, I think we need to discuss how the child can go through different moods where he or she may need additional stimuli, sometimes less. How can you create different experiences, circumstances in the house so that the child can self-direct some of the movement, and sometimes you can also take them there to try and force them into the mood they may need at that moment. And then, tools of the trade. So some things that I've utilized myself that have been extremely helpful. And again, I'm hoping to make these things inexpensive, simple, easy, in and around the house that anyone can do. So why are CDC children different? So the primary difference is, of course, going to be genetics, but the genetics can manifest themselves in different ways. So it will depend on the child. Obviously, with CDC, we see a developmental delay. So a child that's 3 years old compared to a CDC child at 3 years old, they're going to have a very different sensory profile just because of their overall mental age. So sometimes you will need to treat a child that is 3 years old with CDC as if he or she is 12 months old or 18 months old. It is just a very different child. You can't look at the same chronological age as such. Certain genes can be deleted that would show very strong correlations with a autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. So that's going to be quite an important aspect. Because of their developmental delay, you can see that their communication skills can be severely lacking. An inability to communicate one's wishes, frustrations, pains can drive certain behavioral patterns, and out of desperation, all things can happen, and that's something we need to watch out for. Um, a CDC child, for their own reasons, will have a very strong fixation on uh, oral sensitivity. So when you give them a toy, when you play with them, everything is experienced through the mouth. It's the place where um, the impact, the profile of whatever is being uh, 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 tasted, most directly goes to the brain. So when you have a small child, a baby, first toy is always going to the mouth, and then over time, once you understand all those different things that are out there, you start to feel things more with your hands, and you rely less on your mouth. But with a CDC child, the mouth often remains a key source of the overall sensory profile. So that's something to bear in mind because it has implications. And yeah, there are aspects from the things I've just mentioned that can induce self-destructive behavior, i.e., banging of the head, biting, just overall pushing and maybe some form of aggression. And that's not always necessarily bad, because you do actually want the child to be able to communicate his or her limits, their thresholds for acceptance of things that they don't want or like. Um, but yeah, sometimes they can be very painful in what they do. So we have to look at those things and discuss some of the options that are out there. Um, Before we talk about behavior in the most general sense, and there's a couple of aspects here that we really need to discuss. Um, we have to distinguish between a behavioral disorder and an intellectual development disorder, right? So um, a great example for, just as an FYI, would be eye contact, right? Um, Often when a child doesn't make eye contact, the number one thing we all think is autism. This child has difficulty making eye contact because there's a behavioral disorder, and that may not always be the case. When you have a very young child, who's only a couple months old, a month old, they will they may be poor at making eye contact, and that can actually be an intellectual development thing as opposed to a behavioral disorder thing. It really, really depends. Now, I'm not suggesting that the bulk of the behavioral things with a CDC child are going to be intellectual development. I don't think that for a moment, but I do think it's important to consider the fact that some of the behavioral disorders that you're going to see in a child, they're going to be prevalent today and they can be minor to non-existent tomorrow. It may change over time, and that can be a day, that can be a month, that can be a year, that can be a decade, but it is subject to change as the child matures and its overall intellectual development becomes more complete. Um, so we have to make this distinction because it influences your overall prognosis. It influences your treatment plan of the child. It also influences you in the kind of situations and games you may want to create to try and motivate and incentivize a certain form of engagement. So, some of the things I did is I played, games in which my eyes, they were giving him an idea of what's about to happen. Like if I were to undress him, I would build excitement with my eyes, and perhaps facial features. So he would pay stark attention to my face, because that was going to tell him what was about to happen. So we had great fun with that, lots of laughter, and that's, it stuck. And he makes great eye contact now, but when he was perhaps 6 months old, a year old, it was really tough. He was really absent in his face. You could hardly see that he would see you. So it's nice as a parent to make the eye contact, to make the social connection, because you're getting something back. You're getting that enjoyment factor. You're getting that excitement. So for me, it was a big factor. So I definitely recommend trying to do things like that. But the fact of the matter is that an ASD diagnosis is going to be likely, and we'll get into that in a second. But this means that you will see some form of self-regulation, some rocking, maybe some behavior that is designed for him to stimulate himself to the right level, so that he relaxes. And sometimes maybe we can help the child to give him or her some choices, and then making a choice, they can help identify what kind of activity stimulates them in the right way, and over time he or she may be able to direct those choices themselves, as opposed to you having to be there. So autism is going to be a big topic. I think the majority of kids with Cri du Chat are going to be affected by autism. I don't like the term autism, because I actually think that the Cri du Chat behavioral pattern is distinct on its own. I don't necessarily just want to pigeonhole it as autism. There are particular activities, particular repetitive things that they do that makes it a class on its own. But the fact of the matter is that the autism quite closely captures quite a few of the things. And so, what we see is that a particular gene is deleted often, CTNND2 gene, and this is going to be the painful one for it to be missing. This particular gene, has strong correlations with intellectual development delays, but also with the probability of getting an ASD diagnosis. So, yes, the CTNND2 gene is going to be the elephant in the room. And most CDC children will have this particular gene missing. So what does it mean? Well, it means that, for example, my son, he will rock in his bed. The rocking is in some ways good. It means that he is trying to self-regulate as opposed to needing me to regulate. So that is good. The ASD diagnosis on my son isn't there, to be absolutely frank. It's self-diagnosed. So we can all talk about the limitations of what I'm saying here, but this is my personal opinion, and I have had friends who are um, who have a psychological background who can diagnose these things, say that some of the behavioral patterns that we're seeing are definitely ASD spectrum behavioral patterns. What we're also seeing are things like getting really scared of things that would seem normal to you and I. So let's say we're watching a cartoon and there's a big ball that is big proportional to the characters. Um, our son could overreact to that. He goes from 0 to petrified in an instant. Like, it is absolute fear in his eyes. And I cannot explain that. So it's a problem because he can get scared by things that you and I would just not be sensitive to. And so the thing will come on, he will get scared out of his mind. And that means running, pushing around, hurting himself potentially in the process by falling over or bumping into things, and just crying and complete unhappiness. So that's really tough because it's not just one thing. And I try to be sensitive to the things that he's sensitive to, but it remains difficult to understand. So one of the things someone explained to me was that sometimes cartoons are bad, especially for kids with autism. Cartoons are bad because these are abstract drawings of real things. So, sometimes actual pictures of people, actual real life things are much less confronting than these 2D abstract realities that can invoke a complete fear response. So, yeah, difficult. In general, the way I've been explained autism is that it's these are people that find it very difficult to block out external stimuli. So they are sensitive to everything. They pay attention to everything. And so you have to really be mindful of that. The child will have difficulty blocking stuff out. So if you can create a space where you can remove all these externalities, that would be amazing, because it allows the child to focus on the things that they want to focus on. So yeah, it's difficult. I would say that things like a soft space can help, a space where he or she can go that's completely theirs and it's quiet, and maybe you can apply some deep pressure. Deep pressure therapy is a thing. It can be as simple as a hug, a very tight hug, like you've not seen someone you've loved for like a year. You really hug them tight. That can be the simplest form of deep pressure. It can also mean, like weighted blankets, or those bean bags where they have those weighted blankets that fold over the child. They can really help. What also can help are things like bite rings. So the way I would explain that is, because of the oral fixation, especially with Cri du Chat, but also sometimes it happens in autism, the bite rings can be very handy. So, you can buy these for like €10, $10, rubbery things that they can just continuously chew on and won't break or go into the mouth or cause all kinds of help. but they like playing with it. It's like a fidget spinner or something like that. It just keeps them occupied, keeps them focused on that one particular thing. So, our son, he would have trouble sitting in a particular stroller that we would use when we're traveling. And I have just plastered a number of those bite rings on the stroller so that while he's in it, he can fidget away as much as he wants with all the different kinds of bite things. And to be absolutely honest, bite rings, bite things in general are really easy to find in just the baby section. Just go to the 6 months and younger section of any a kids store or baby apparel store, and you're going to find all kinds of things that you can attach and hang around the neck, or just a ring that they can bite into, and you can just affix it with tie rips to a stroller. I say silly things, but you can be very simple and pragmatic about giving them these tools to indulge their intention. Understanding that part is important to understand the self-harm part. The self-harm part is a consequence. It's a reaction. It's a reaction to being overstimulated, being understimulated, being frustrated, having a pain. It can be a number of things. And yeah, because we're dealing with a child that has a difficulty communicating themselves, it'll escalate quickly if it's not dealt with, and it'll be a guessing game, frankly. So yeah, it's hard. So yeah, unfortunately, self-harm is a thing. Unfortunately, the head is going to be the main tool of the trade. So it means the banging of the head. So he can be on the floor, he gets frustrated by something, and just completely wallops it against the floor. So we've put mats down, those rubbery mats. So while he's playing and he gets frustrated, if he bangs his head on the floor, it's not going to be a thing. He can bang his head against an object because it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. He can bang his head against a person. With me and my wife, that's really frustrating. Becomes a problem when it happens at the nursery or at like a play group or like a soft play area. Child is in the way, not doing what it's supposed to be doing according to my son, and he'll use his head to try and communicate, get out of the way. Unfortunately, most parents, when they see this, they won't understand that my son, he's got a particular limitation, and he doesn't understand that this is not a cool way to communicate. So he just does it, and I can explain it until I'm blue in the face. He won't understand what I'm explaining. So it's hard. You try to make the best out of it, and the only thing to do really is de-escalate and try to draw his attention away onto something else. Again, those bite rings can be great. Maybe it's a toy, maybe it's an exercise, maybe it's an activity. Sometimes he just needs to leave the room. There are things in that room that he's sensitive to that are just not going great. Just go away. Just take him outside. Take him to another room. Do something else. Put on a cartoon. I have no idea, but you can probably find ways to redirect the attention onto something more positive. Finding the source is going to be always a trick, but it's not always going to be possible. So yeah, creating an environment where the child can stimulate themselves is ideal. Giving them many choices is ideal. And hopefully over time, the child becomes less and less reliant on you as a parent. I don't think you can create one environment and make it the end all of everything. I think the home needs to be a safe space, and you need to create as much opportunity there as possible. But I think throughout the day, you will want to try and create some activities that are outdoors to try and, not make the house go stale for him or her. Um, so yeah, activities, going outside, doing things, very helpful. Difficult. Um, I found it easier to stay inside. I was just tired. Took so much effort to do the things that we needed to do for him, that to then have the prospect of going out again, it was just tough. Um, but as you optimize, re-engineer your activities, you find ways of creating windows of doing things, whether that's going to see friends, going to the park, going to a playground, just going for a walk. Many things are possible. Sensory profile. I wanted to itemize a few things that worked for me, or that I found to be of particular focus for him. So we have the oral fixation. We've already discussed a few of those things. I didn't just want to talk about that from the sense of the opportunities you can create to focus on that oral fixation. You also need to see the hazards. Anything that's on the floor, on the table, that looks interesting, is going to go into the mouth, and some of those things are hazardous. So, given the fact that we're dealing with dysphagia, certain drinks, watch out. They may be thinned, and you don't want that. It's going to go into his lungs, lung infection, not good. Sometimes there are small bowls. Choking very easily, quickly happens. Again, watch out. There could be sharp objects, of course, and all kinds of hazardous materials. Watch out. But aside from that, the oral fixation, a bowl bath is amazing. Could you just imagine just all those bowls there, and just licking them all? It sounds really silly, but my son, his bowl bath is everything. He just lies in it. It makes you feel kind of weightless, and all those bowls are a source of engagement. So for him, it's great. Water play. Water is great. The texture of water, the movement of it, the flow of it. It's just a great source of enjoyment for my son. So, like, being in the bath and playing with the water, wow, that's like amazing. At the same time, it's a massive source of discomfort for me as a parent. With his dysphagia, I have the prospect of that water going into his lungs. The reality is that it's going to go there. So you make trade-offs. You try and weigh out, okay, well, the water play is engaging him massively. He's really enjoying it. He's trying all kinds of things out and toys, and he's really pushing himself at that moment. So great, but at the same time, we have to weigh out the risks. So me and my wife, we've made the decision that bath time is something he needs, that it's good for his development, while being respectful of the risks it imposes, trying to minimize them as much as possible. And if they ever create, medically speaking, a hazardous or dangerous environment, then we will stop with it. So for the moment, it's all going fine. But if that ever changes, we will revisit that particular chapter. But for the moment, water play for us, we've decided, is net positive. Textures. Our son, he loves textures. So if you've got a book with like the flip flaps, and like underneath you've got like different kinds of, fur and all kinds of different textures, like velcro-y and cardboardy and maybe a tile or a rubber or all kinds of different textures that you can have underneath. He will have that. Sometimes you've got toys, like on Amazon, they have this wooden board, and inside are wooden blocks, and inside each block you've got a texture, and then on the wooden board you've got the same textures, like match them up. He hasn't matched them yet, of course, but he loves running his finger over all those little holes and actually finding those different textures, and he is experiencing them all with his fingers and his mouth, of course. So yeah, games. There are many toys around and games that have all these different textures. Video can be really, really engaging. Video is great when it works. So if you've got a particular show that he really likes, great. He will enjoy it. He will focus on it. And that focus is gold, because that focus means he's not fighting you doing a particular thing. So for us, the video was the enabler to us feeding him in a reasonable manner. If we didn't have the video, he would focus on the food. He would be combative. It would not be smooth. Putting on the video, zeroes his focus, and he is somewhat more relaxed and accepting of, the exercise of eating. So video is good, and sometimes it also influences other activities like changing a nappy or things like that. If you need him to just sort of mellow out and just focus on the video, then that is a good thing. Rough play, which is a colloquial word of vestibular therapy. So when you have got that sort of that sense inside of you where you're feeling like your balance going left and right, or your weightlessness or things like that, kids with an ASD spectrum, and I've seen this with kids with Cri du Chat, they love it when this particular organ in their system is being stimulated. So rough play, like really, throwing up the child, or like throwing them on the bed, or things like that. But it's also things like going on a swing, things like a slide, or maybe a trampoline. You are invoking that sense of your balance organ, trying to stimulate that as much as possible, and it just relaxes them completely. So if you put them in a swing, when we were first doing that, someone looked at my son, because I made a video, and they said, well, look at the hands. And I was like, well, why would you look at the hands? And he said, well, when you've got a child that has the sensory profile that Matteo has, the frustration goes to the hands, and they'll be clenched. But then when they relax, like they go into the swing, and they get that balance organ stimulated, they relax and they open up, and that is signal of he's really, really comfortable. And apparently swings are incredibly effective with these kinds of children. So something to watch out for. Games. I cannot stress enough how some of the games that I've created, I've bought really expensive toys. Like I have a particular toy that's circular, so it rotates, and within the rotating drum there are additional rotating drums, and inside those rotating drums are different kinds of things that make sound. These are clearly made for kids with a autistic kind of background, and he loved it. Don't get me wrong. But at the same rate, he loved the fact that I had a DHL box, something I got for $0, cut a hole into it at the very top of it, and put balls into it. And the magic of going inside with your hand and grabbing a ball out and putting them in the ball bath. Explain to me. It's just, you don't have to do crazy things to create these kinds of games. But creating these kind of purposeful exercises, for example, of like reallocating balls, it's a great stimulant of like the mind for these kids. So I've done it with a little slide I have in the living room. I created this, basket with loads of different balls of different sizes and different textures. And he just continuously goes to that particular basket, grabs a ball, and then throws it down the slide. Enabling different moods. So at different points of the day, and it can be very volatile, we see that our son has different requirements. At some moment, he wants to be stimulated. He's asking for it. He wants to color. He wants to pop bubbles, so he'll give me the bubble flask, Daddy, please blow some bubbles. He won't say that, but he'll give it to me, implying he wants that. And sometimes he is as clever as getting a towel and then marching me to the front door so that we go to the swing. He knows that I want to put down the towel for him on the swing so that he can lie down on it. So he actually gets the actual towel and then makes me come to the front door with him. So I know that he wants to go onto the swing. So there are moments where you can clearly see they're asking for a certain stimuli. So sometimes you see that he wants to be stimulated less. So he'll be asking to be, placed in the bed, and the bed is a source of great comfort. And other moments he clearly wants to be watching television. So yeah, be sensitive to that. Try to be as much as possible. And maybe, your son, your child, your daughter will surprise you in what they can communicate. I think creating structure is important. It's probably the most important thing. So a form of structure in terms of like the time you wake up, the time that you eat, the time you go to the bar, the time you go to bed, creating some fixed slots in the day at which you do these kinds of things creates some dependency in your child, some expectations of what's going to be happening now. Oh yeah, we're eating now. Yeah, well, we always eat at this time. So yeah, it's now is the time to eat. Now is the time to sleep. So there's not really a debate. So that's something I would emphasize, and it also means that when these things happen, it doesn't frustrate them. They know it's going to be happening, so it becomes comfortable, and then the less guessing, the less frustrations you'll have as well. Yeah, I would say try to create different profiles of different rooms. The bedroom is for sleeping, the living room is for doing things. Maybe a certain part of the living room is for certain activities. The sofa is for watching television. You've got the dinner table for eating, and you create these different parts of the house, and you try to optimize those. When you're trying to relax, maybe there's a bed there, but maybe there's also like a mountain of pillows. I have no idea, but things for relaxation. Yeah. So yeah, tools of the trade. I think I can do separate videos on all of these because diving into them with more depth is reasonable to do. So some things I would focus on is vestibular play, so like a trampoline, a swing, slides, things like that. Deep pressure, it's very effective. The strong hug, a weighted blanket, uh, um, um, maybe even some of those bite rings. They can help as well. Ball pits. I think every CDC child probably needs a ball pit. At least I've seen most of them really like it. Books, yeah, especially books with like flaps and different textures and all that kind of stuff. They love it. Sound, engaging with sounds of toys, little cars that when you press a button makes a certain sound. They love that kind of thing. When they start realizing that the thing starts to do a thing when you press a button, then they'll keep hitting that button over and over again, and it just becomes part of their overall sensory profile. Again, video has been incredibly effective at focusing the mind and enabling some of the activities that you as a parent need to do: feeding, changing a nappy, changing the child in general. Games. We often try to create games to elicit certain engagement, whether that's communication, whether that's eye contact, whether that's just general social stuff. All kinds of games that we can create to just help him along with his development. Puzzles. Yeah, it sounds crazy. Of course, he's limited, but you can see that he's trying to problem solve, and so you can give him smaller problems. So help him or her out in doing certain things, or maybe it's him realizing that something needs to be placed and giving you the piece so that you place it for him. And if you've done it enough times, then he'll do it himself. Keep working with him or her as long as you need. Yeah, there's loads of things I'd love him to be more acute about, but it's just going to take a little longer with some things. But definitely there are loads of games out there, puzzles that you can absolutely play with. I love the game whereby you have like one of those big machine looking things where you put the ball into the top and then it goes through like a course and comes out the bottom. It took him some time, many months, but he started to realize that he can put the ball in himself, and he did, and he loves doing it. So yeah, absolutely, keep trying, and yeah, work with both a physio and a speech and language specialist. Identify his development, both in his intellectual development and communicative development, but also his physical development. So like, how is he walking? How is he moving? His motor skills, his fine motor skills, how are those developing? And keep that development, keep tracking that, and see where things are going well, see where things are going badly, and then try and optimize that journey, because the one thing affects the other. And so you need to try and identify, like, okay, well, he's not walking. Okay, well, if we make him walk, then he'll be, more paying attention to like all the things around him, because he needs to walk and pay attention and not fall and that kind of thing. So if we help him to walk, maybe his intellectual development will sprout a bit more fast as a consequence. So as opposed to making him do puzzles, now we're going to focus on making him walk, because that way he'll get to solving puzzles more quickly. I say silly things, but these things are intertwined. These things are not individual paths. They conjoin at many points, and you need to try and identify exactly where the development is going, and how to develop a plan that optimize all those things coming together. So anyways, I hope that was helpful. I've just tried to create some ideas for you, try to create the conversation. and let's have the conversation. Let's see what we can learn from each other. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the very best.